100 years after the Battle of the Somme, a group from the southwest of England are going on a tour of the Western Front to learn more about the experiences of those who fought in World War I. Among them are passengers whose journeys are more personal, retracing the steps of family members who fought in the war. They'll be led by military historian Jeremy Banning.
I feel that trips such as this are really important. I think what really gets people is what their relatives were involved in. A lot of families will have their stories that they think that have been passed down over generations. I'm hoping that I'll be able to elaborate on them and show them exactly where their relatives fought. When you talk about statistics, you talk about 500,000 men, 1 million men. It's just numbers. You can't visualise it. Whereas when you can bring it down to one individual story and you see how the loss of that soldier, or perhaps that soldier went back and yet his behaviour changed thereafter, how that affected that family, you see that's one family, that's one soldier. Then you multiply that out and you see the effect of that war across the whole society.
Norman Jerrim often visits the war memorial in his hometown of Weston-super-Mare. Norman wants to go on the tour to pay respects not only to his grandfather, but also his grandmother.
My grandmother's name was Lottie Cook. She lost her husband in 1916. He was a corporal in the Gulfstream Guards. His name was Frank Cook. He would have died when he was in his early 30s on the battlefield. So I feel obviously that my grandmother was very badly affected by the loss, and I feel that seeing her, even in my own memory now, we were crying, holding his letters. I feel that I was too young to actually sort of understand. She would have received a widow's pension, but was so poor that she had to struggle and go out to work and scrub floors and obviously sort of, try and get by. Today women have got things a lot better than what they had years ago. So back in their generation, it wasn't easy for women to sort of get by. I feel I'd be letting my family down if I didn't go. I don't really know too much about the experiences of the battle that you would have fought in. I also pay respect mainly. What information I can get, I'd be grateful because I pass it on to my own daughter. I know it might sound a bit daft, but this photograph on the wall, because I got it in a frame I speak to him. I said, I'm coming, Frank, to pay my respect to you, mate.
People like Norman are why we're running this trip. His story resonates. It really does. His grandfather was killed out on the Somme in 1916, leaving his grandmother to pick up the pieces. And it's for her that Norman really wants to come. He wants to pay his respects to his grandfather, but he could see how his grandfather's death affected his grandmother and how much poverty she lived in, how hard she had to fight just for day-to-day living. And that's a story that gets forgotten in the war. There's so much emphasis on the dead. What about those that were left at home, picking up the pieces, those carrying on, cracking on with everything? And I just think that it really, really is very important that we remember those people, as Norman's doing.
But one passenger may find what they're looking for barely past the border of Belgium as the group travels towards Ypres.
My paternal grandfather was Alfred William McGill. He was in the 12th Battalion, the Gloucestershire Regiment. I hadn't realised until a few months ago that he was in the 12th Gloucesters, and that got me interested in it, and I've done a little bit more research. My grandfather never spoke about his time in the army to me very much. And I'd like to learn a bit more about it, and in particular learn a bit more about my grandfather's time there, where he fought, and maybe there's some more information there. My mother's father, my maternal grandfather, was also in the First World War. He was known as Frank Collins. He was in the 2nd Battalion, the Monmouthshire Regiment, and he was killed on Christmas Day 1914 during the Christmas truce. So the story is that he just delivered sort of cigarettes to the enemy. I think it was a Saxon regiment, and coming back he was shot in the back and died a short time afterwards. It's always been there. It's not as though I can sort of, when I first remembered it, it's always been part of my family history, really. It's one of these, I don't know, sort of an urban myth type of thing. It sort of gathers, it gets bigger and bigger as time goes by, in a way. It was only after my grandmother died that I then acquired some of the more information that she had. There were directions how to get to the cemetery, but she never did visit. Yeah, she spoke about it, but not very often. It's not really remarkable to me because I've grown up with it. I've always known about it. I don't know whether it's any different from any other family, really, because everybody's got a story to tell, haven't they?
Well, if you could just gather in for a second, because this will be a story that should resonate with all of us, really. I think it's, believe it or not, this was one of my first battlefield presentations to come to this group, because I remember reading this story and finding it really rather remarkable. Sergeant Blackwood Jones, a former Pontypool footballer, who had himself led a group into no man's land carrying a newspaper on top of his rifle as a flag of truce, wrote angrily about the event in a letter which was published in the South Wales Weekly Argus under the headlines, "Sad news from the firing line, Sergeant treacherously shot. I took some tobacco and jam to the Germans, but never no more. Another sergeant, a pal of mine from Monmouth, did the same, but when he was coming back to the trench, they shot him through the back and killed him. And the sergeant in question was this man, Frank Collins, a 39-year-old former postman who left a widow and 3 children. His official notification of death described him as having been killed in action. The action in which he was engaged was taking woodbines to the Germans. And the Germans later sent over an apology. And this is him. And this is your relative, Terry.
Yes, yes.
And he is, remind me, he's your grandfather. There you go, it's Terry's grandfather. And this is a picture of him. Poor old Frank was killed, taking tobacco, or taking his woodbines over to the Germans. It was a story with Frank Collins, this man from the Monmouthshire regiment who was shot in the back by the Germans after giving them woodbines in no man's land. Now, I first read that, I don't know, perhaps 15, 20 years ago, and I was struck by that. It was a name that resonated in my head, Frank Collins. I always thought I'd like to go to his grave, and ironically, it seems strange that Terry's related to this man who I've known his story for the last 15 or so years. The Christmas truce is one of those events that has been exaggerated in many and misconstrued in the public's imagination. Our common perception is that men were playing football and smoking German cigars all the way along the line. That's far from the truth. So I think the war is extraordinary. It's got every element that you would want. Courage, bravery, cowardice, grief, love, everything in there. You don't need to make it up. Let's just tell the truth. Thank you.
It didn't seem out of the ordinary to me. I've sort of grown up with it, and it's a bit surprising to me that other people are interested in it, really. Because there were many families that lost their husbands and sons in that war. It's a bit ironic, really, because I didn't know my mother's father. I did know my father's father. He survived the war, but I know very little about his military experience. He never spoke about it.
I think Terry's situation is very common of many people. Families know about soldiers that went off and were killed in the war. They simply don't know about their relatives who came back from the war. So with Terry, we know that he knows the story of Frank Collins. That's fine, that's no problem at all. But actually, ironic that his grandfather that came back, who he knew, he knows nothing about his war service whatsoever. Without those family stories, I don't think that, clearly Terry wouldn't have had any information about either of his grandfathers. It was a fantastic ending for the first day of the trip.
It's day 2 of the tour, travelling between the Ypres salient towards the Somme, And Norman isn't the only one hoping to get answers before the end of the trip.
Well, for Bob and Carol, they're a really sweet couple, and I'm looking forward to finding out what I can about Bob's uncle, Harold Knight. Now, Bob is recovering from throat cancer, and I know that he's very keen to go to the battlefields and see where his uncle fought and fell. And I have a strange connection with Bob and Carol because they've been married around 60 years or so, and they've been cycling together all that time. They're really keen cyclists, and I'm in no way at that level, but I'm a bit of an avid cyclist myself as well, so we have that slight connection.
My name is Harold Lewis Knight, one of my dad's older brothers.
And you can see where he lived.
And they lived in Grove Park Avenue, Brislington. When he was 14, because three of his brothers were already in France fighting, he enlisted in what we think is the Warwickshire Regiment. But my grandfather got him out, said he wasn't 18, and then he merely went and enlisted again. So that's all I really know about him. They all came back except for Harold.
They thought it was an adventure because it was another way to see another part of the world, wasn't it, which they would never seen possibly in normal life. I think probably they looked at it all with rose-tinted glasses, a lot of them in a way, didn't they, I think. And those people went freely too. I think the people's views today about going to war would be, well, I suppose it could be annihilation anyway, couldn't it, today? It wouldn't be the same war anymore. And they knew, really, that a good watch of them would never come home. He was 16
He was
then.
finally killed, I think it was August 1916, he was 16 then, when he was killed.
They always spoke about him in the family, didn't they?
They always had those pictures up by where my granny used to sit. The picture and the medals are always up on the wall.
So his memory was always, carried through in the family, wasn't it, really?
That's right, yeah.
So that's how you
And the
got,
story was told,
although some of it's embellished. We've got a grandson, and hopefully he'll be made aware of the history of the family anyway. Well, we're hoping. So Rob's always wanted to just go there, haven't you?
Yeah, I think just to go and see where it all happened to him,
And Rob, having got over his illness, he's done so marvellously well. It's 6 years now, and that was something he always wanted to do. So I thought that is an ideal opportunity for him just to do one of his wishes, as he's survived, and we can take a poppy and a cross and hopefully put it somewhere so that Harold would know that we haven't forgotten him. This was our final go at visiting, we hoped.
Harold, believe it or not, enlisted at age 14. Now, you weren't supposed to be fighting overseas until you were 19, so 5 years younger. And it seems remarkable now that we could let a 14-year-old into the army, but because recruiting sergeants were paid by the number of men that enlisted through them, in many cases they turned a blind eye. There were probably a good few 100,000 boy soldiers fighting on the Western Front, so more than you'd imagine. Because Harold died so young, he never had a chance to have a family of his own. And I don't think any of his surviving extended family ever have come out to visit. So the fact that Bob and Carol want to do so makes that really quite a special, it will no doubt be a very special occasion. It is quite difficult actually to find out something about Harold because we know that his service record was destroyed by German bombing in the Second World War, and that makes researching a private soldier very frustrating. We also know that he has no known grave, that his body was lost on the battlefield somewhere, and so that can make, potentially, could be rather a difficult process for me. We'll have to see what the records throw up. Well, when you look in the cemeteries, you'll be surprised at how many wreaths and crosses have been left by relatives of the men that still lie there. I think it's a very important human connection. It's, to use a modern phrase, it's almost a bit of closure in a way, really. Unfortunately, in many cases, there were no bodies to bury at all. And so large memorials to the missing of the British and the Commonwealth, as it's now become, were created out there, running into their tens of thousands, enormous structures, so that even if your loved one had no grave, they are still commemorated in stone on the Western Front.
However, there have been no answers today for Norman or the Knights. It's the last day of the tour on the Somme battlefields, where thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and it's Norman and the Knights' last chance to pay their respects.
Let you go there first of all. Just here, as you walk down here, just a few down there on the left now.
Strange, I didn't know where the grave was. He was in the second row, but I stopped just at this one.
Well, we have a little bit of information about him, and he's a pretty impressive soldier, he was, I would say.
Thank you.
He really was. If you're in the Guards, you're normally a cut above, and we know that he was killed in action. However, we know from what surviving records he had that he actually came over in August 1914.
Yeah.
So he is really one of what was called the old contemptibles.
Yeah.
You should be very, very proud of that. One of the original contingent of the BEF to come over there.
Yeah.
Men would have looked up to him greatly. He would have been a real inspiration. It would have been a great loss for his section and his platoon, probably his company, that he'd been killed. Now, so the war diary says, and this is what the companies were doing, and it simply says killed, number 6119, Corporal F.W. Cook, number 4 company, and number 16540, Private A.S. Cuss, also of number 4 company. And you can see they're buried alongside each other.
Yeah.
I would say it's a pretty good
Connection.
but that they were killed together, and
Yeah.
I would pretty much say it would be by shell fire.
Thank you. Putting it into words is hard. Something has made me do it, which I'm glad. I've always thought about it. I mean, the respect I've got for his courage and all the men that took part in these battles in that war. But I'm glad that I found out some information.
I think that was probably one of the most poignant times I think I've had on the battlefield. You could see how much it meant to Norman to visit that grave that he'd been wanting to go to for decades, really, as well, and to know how much he was a respected soldier, his grandfather. He'd been out there since 1914, made it all the way through to the end of 1916. And I think that the fact that he'd died amongst his men, had been respected, was something you could see Norman almost puffing up with pride. He was, he really took a lot from that. And I think to just see that, know that he was doing his duty almost. That's what it felt like. That he, for decades, he'd wanted to come out there to pay his respects for him and also for his grandmother. And here he was actually being able to do it. And it was a window into that family's grief that I think we were all very lucky to have that opportunity to witness. And I think everyone was very respectful, and you could see that it meant a great deal to him.
Many people on the trip have discovered links with their family members who fought in the war and have had an opportunity to pay their respects. However, one couple remain. The Knights have had a long wait to see if they could find anything out about Bob's relative, but in what seems like a large empty field in the middle of nowhere, Jeremy has a surprise for them.
And we have here, as I said, your uncle, Harold Louis Knight, who was in the 6th Royal Warwicks. who was killed on the 18th of August 1916. Now the thing that's interesting about him, Bob, as well, is of course that he was a Bristol lad, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Brislington.
Brislington, that's right. Son of William and Annie Knight of 15 Grove Park Avenue, Brislington.
Yeah.
Is that too far from where you are now?
No, just up the road.
Just up the road, really?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And what's really interesting about him was I looked and found sadly his service record was destroyed in the Second World War bombing with about 65-70% of others. But I found his medal index card. This is the card that says what medals he would have been entitled to and what they might still be in the family. Have you still got them? Have you?
Yeah, on the wall with his dead
Oh yeah,
man's
no,
penny.
sorry, yeah, you're quite right. I've seen that picture.
Yeah.
And you can see here, Knight Harold L, his original unit, Army Cyclist Corps. Runs in the family, doesn't it? There you go. You telling me you cycled, what was it, 450 miles in 24 hours?
Yeah.
437.
Oh, get it right. Well, I don't need to exaggerate. I mean, come on. Yeah. So there you go. So clearly, there you go. It runs in the family, doesn't it? The cycling genes. Now, what's lovely is that he was there with his unit, the Army Cyclist Corps, and I found this poster. Are you fond of cycling? If so, why not cycle for the King? Recruits wanted by the South Midland Divisional Cyclist Company. And that's who he was with. And the bit I love at the bottom, applications in persons or by letter to cyclists, the Barracks Gloucester. Bad teeth, no bar. Okay? As long as your legs are all right, it didn't matter about your teeth. So that's the problem. So he originally served with the Army Cyclist Corps. It's really unsure exactly when he moved across to the Royal Works. But he did. Now the reason that I think that he did was probably because they found out about this young man's age.
Yeah.
And when I say young man,
He was 14 first of all, and then died at 16, yeah.
that's right, enlisted at 14.
Yeah.
So they would have probably said, you're too young, lad, you're too young, out you go. But he was, like so many young boys there, wanted to do his bit. It may be that he thought, well, I can't enlist here in Bristol. And he went up to Birmingham way. I
So
don't
you
know.
would have to...
He may well have. We simply, without his service record, we've got no idea of whereabouts he enlisted. He might well have only been over here when he was killed on the 18th of August for 6 weeks or so. You can't exactly say whereabouts he would have been, but I would say in this field in front of us, as you look across to the Tearvale Memorial, where he's commemorated on, where he's listed, I think this would be a pretty ideal location for you to consider that it was. This is where he was, and I've got this for you. You've got these maps as well, so you've got the memorial, so you know whereabouts.
All of that. This has all been a total.
It's a pleasure.
And known any of it, I feel.
Don't you worry, don't you worry. I'm sure he'd be delighted that you've all come here all these years later. It's amazing, 100 years later we can stand on
We
the
needed to
spot.
make this pilgrimage, yes, while we could, yes.
Where side is there?
If I were you, Bob, I'd see if you can do that just on the edge of that field there, because I think this was where he would have been killed. And who knows, he might even still be alive.
I just can't believe it.
Well, you obviously weren't the only one that enlisted underage. Quite a lot of them are pretty young anyway.
It's so terribly sad, and really it makes me think, what's the point when I see all these young men, the headstones in these cemeteries? I never realised there were so many, and the small ones that are dotted about the countryside as well. It just brings it all home to you. But we knew very little about all of this, and Jeremy's put a whole new light on it. I feel, just standing here now, perhaps his spirit, he knows we've made the pilgrimage, which is something we've always wanted to do as this opportunity came up.
And that was incredibly poignant to be able to take him to the spot where young Harold, this 16-year-old at the time, was killed in 1916. Afterwards, I was able to take Bob and Carol up to the Tearvale Memorial to see Harold's name engraved in the ranks of the thousands of other men on there, because that's a journey that he's wanted to go on for decades, to be able to see the site where Harold had fought and been killed, and to actually see his name commemorated. And for me, that's the absolute crux of what I do. At that point, you can take them to the site, and then you take a step back, because really that's all about them. That's their moment, and it's their thoughts. And for me, it's absolute magic.
so many family stories changed forever with the Great War. Among the memorials, graveyards and battlefields of Belgium and France, there are secrets still waiting to be uncovered. For those who make the journey, it can uncover an important connection with the past.